Hello and welcome back into Starship Simulator for part 2 of my August update, now bleeding into September. Part 1 I did a couple of weeks ago, but I had to cut it short because I ran out of time before we had to travel for a week, so just coming back in to finish up some thoughts, some opinions, and just take a look at the inside of the ship at some of the work that is ongoing. And even from 2 weeks ago, more has been completed up here on B deck since that last video, so we'll see some changes even from that. So let's head up to the bridge. We'll start up there and then just make our way down through some of the decks to see what's been going on. And while we do that, let's head over to the Starship Sim Discord page, because one of the things that I wanted to talk about, a lot of questions both on my videos and on the live streams, have been, when is the next public demo update coming out? The short answer is a while, perhaps a couple of months, depending on how fast work can get done. The more in-depth answer is that this particular update has been so complex and basically has included tearing down and rebuilding the ship into the new shape, tearing down and rebuilding the galaxy, and then trying to get the sensors up to speed to begin the first gameplay loop in the game of being able to actually go scan planets and to be able to scan for life on those planets. Now I'm just bringing this over here real quick just to show you that there is actually a roadmap in place. If you want to head over here, you can check it out if you want the nitty-gritty details, but we'll just do a quick overview here. Current patch cycle is 0.225, and again, this is trying to get the dev build here back into a usable state to be reintroduced and out into the world and update the public demo version that's on Steam. So that's what the goal is here. So here in this patch, three main objectives of the developers is to remodel the ship, remodel the galaxy, and then completely overhaul the sensors interface. And then we've got this whole list of things that have been done. Obviously, check mark means that a goal has been reached, and then tools is still under construction. So for the galaxy, for example, Roche limits were added to all of the star systems. This prevents planets from generating inside stars, and also can be used to determine the presence of planetary rings if a moon is generated too close to a planet. Actual moons are still planned to come later, but will not be implemented just yet. And also, the galaxy was switched over to the real stellar data in the Gaia database, and the range of that extended out to 2,000 light years. So anything within 2,000 light years of Earth is going to be real-world data, and so that's been implemented as well. So that's been the new galaxy setup. The last thing that still needs to be done galaxy-wise is actually adding the beginnings of the life generation code. So once that's in place, as we fly around and scan the planets, alien races will start appearing, although only at this point as text descriptions in the sensors panel. So you won't see actual ships flying around or civilizations. We may see the lights of development on the planets of cities and things, but basically this is just the foundations of taking the next step to building up the galaxy more. So that is we're still waiting for that. And then updating the ship's interior, reworking a lot of the wall panels, and then getting those into place. That's ongoing. And finishing up the corridor modeling in B deck, including the security desks. So that is almost completely done. That's been the subject of the live stream work the last couple of weeks. And then a big thing was also overhauling the sensors to bring it up, or to improve the design and to include more information to make it a little bit easier to use. Some work on the sensors panel still needs to get done. This was a big thing here, creating floor cavities in the ship's framework for new floor paneling. So basically, not only was the ship completely redesigned, but it's actually going to be taller than originally was planned. Dan he said a meter cavity in between each deck, so between the deck of one and the overhead of the other. So that's going to allow for the running of cabling, ducting, and any systems in between the decks. So what that meant is that all of the stairs no longer fit. So, and actually, even maybe we'll see if we go down to the engineering space, things are not reaching the ceiling. So as he goes, he's basically starting from A deck and then moving down to get all this stuff polished up. So once he gets down to engineering, it's just going to be elongating some ship's geometry to reach the new ceiling, and to make and redesigning some of the steps, the stairwells, to make all those fit. When all these are done, whatever, however long that happens to take, and it is getting closer, but stuff still does need to get done. When all this is done, then the public demo will get updated, and then you will see there what we're seeing here in the dev build. And like I said, current estimates have been a month to maybe 2 months, and that's a little conservative estimate. It may be sooner than that, but it's also still slow-going work. After that's done, the next update is going to be dealing with the bridge crew. They're not going to go anywhere or have schedules where they rotate shifts or anything. They're just going to be stuck in the seats, but that'll be the first time that we'll be able to interact with them and give them orders and tell them to do things. So like ordering your helmsman to go to a location, that system is going to start to be put into place and get tested, and we're going to see how that is going to work. In addition to that, work will continue on the exterior ship model. That will be little bits with each update. Once that is complete, the update following that will be the sublight engines, the addition of those, and that's going to be, you can see here, a lot of things planned for that update as well. So that's what's coming in the future, in the far future. And if you want to check that out in detail, like I said, you can go to the Starship Simulator Discord, and it's here under the roadmap. Back up here on the bridge now, we'll start on A deck and make our way down and just walk around and look at some things. Not a whole lot of changes up here in the bridge, but there are a few small things, so let's take a look at those. But before we do, let's go into the settings, because there have been some updates to some of the options and the UI. A big one is that head bob has now been made its own option here in the settings. Previously, it had been one of the cameras that you would cycle through. It was first person head bob on or off. Now that has been eliminated. You can just have it all the time on or off, depending on whatever your preference is. Some people liked it. Other people, it made them ill, gave them a little bit of motion sickness. So here you can just turn it on or off, which is a nice little addition. The next thing, under accessibility, you can now adjust the camera zoom to whatever you want. So when you right click, there, let's get back into the game. So when you right click, you get a bit of a camera zoom, and this allows you to zoom in on different displays, and then if you hold the E key, then you can press things and interact with the panels. Default is 50%, which is what we're seeing here. If you don't like that, if you want more or less, you can now change that in the options here under accessibility. You can go all the way down to 0 to have no zoom, or up to 100. And like I said, default is 50, which is where I like to leave it. So that's new. And then finally, under controls, we have new crosshairs that can be used. Previously, it was just a single dot. In fact, let's see, it's number 1. Here we go. So number 1, it's just a white dot. And some people found it hard to see sometimes, especially if you were, say, looking out at stars. It would sort of look like a star, or it would just be very small and difficult to make out on a busy UI panel, for example, or something. So it was a fairly easy thing to just bring in 23, or I guess 22 new cursors. So lots to choose from: circular, square, diamond, with different things around them. So the one I prefer is 19, sort of the radiation trifoil one. There's actually another one that has a circle around it, but I like the plain one. So yeah, a whole new line of crosshairs available to you in the game if you prefer something besides the default dot. Also, just before we get going here, I just wanted to touch on one more thing. Just wanted to clarify again that I am not part of the development team for this game. I'm simply a fan who's very excited about it, and I'm just sharing information about the game because I found it, I discovered it through another YouTube video. So I'm just passing that along to other people who might be interested. So we'll start here with the command station. This is the captain's and XO's chairs, whichever one you want to use. They're actually interchangeable. The main thing here is the holo display command interface, which you can turn off for an unobstructed view of the windows, which would be useful for things like, combat, or even if you were just cruising, if you just wanted to get the obstruction out of the middle of the room here. At a later time, when all of these other systems are fleshed out, you would be able to switch between all of the consoles, all of the stations here on the bridge to see what people are looking at and be able to project it here in the middle. But as sensors are the only things that are somewhat completed right now, that's all we have to look at. But that's turn that on and off. And in fact, speaking of the sensors, here is a look at the upgraded sensors UI. This is still under construction. There is more work to come on this, but just here's some of the things that we see now. It's very easy to manipulate the display range. We can change the display focus, whether it's the center or the location of the ship. You can also switch between the ship's coordinates and inputting manual locations. And if we go to long-range scanners, we can filter by detectable object, including all the star types, rogue planets, black holes, and nebulas. So for example, a B-class star, there's only one within 150 light years. And then it shows us all of the planets that are in that system, and then we would be able to scan them. Very rudimentary scanning right now. This will be improved later, and will show additional things like surface data, orbital characteristics, atmospheric composition. Medium range shows the local star system, which again can be easily manipulated with the new display range controls. And then short range will show the actual planet or body that you're orbiting. The nice thing about this is it shows it with a neutral light source. So the color of the star that the planet is orbiting can actually change how the planet looks, and also has dark sides in which you can't see anything. Here, this is quite interesting. This is the first time I've seen this, but this is an Earth analog planet, so it's an Earth-like, except it seems to be in the middle of an ice age, because you can see major portions appear to be covered with not clouds, but actual ice. And additionally, we have a lot of lights indicating that there's a civilization thriving here as well. That'll be one of the additional updates to the sensors once they get fleshed out completely, is once the life seeds have been added to the galaxy itself, then they'll also be added to the sensors, and then we would be able to detect information about the civilizations on the sensors as well. At the helm station, not much has changed. We do have a manual data entry box in the navigation page now, and this would allow us to clear and input by hand any galactic coordinates that we would want to go to, and then enter. You can see just plugging this in, we get a distance 487 light years, and then we would be able to engage the autopilot and head there, or fly manually if we wanted to. One of the small improvements that I noticed that I really like has been to the control of the ship. The ship now feels heavier, more realistic, with some mass behind it. When I release the input, inertia continues carrying the ship movement through the axis for just a little bit. Keep in mind this is only a temporary control system for now, until the sublight system gets fully completed, but I'm happy because this is the kind of flight model that I'm hoping to eventually see. Coming from the aviation world, and decades of flight sims, getting a flight model dialed in is very important to me. As a pilot, I want it to feel realistic and rewarding when I'm flying something, especially in a game like this where each crew member should feel like they're contributing to the overall mission. I think it's important to make sure that the helmsman can be more useful than just babysitting the autopilot. Elite Dangerous is a good example to use here, because I love the flight physics in that game. Small ships are maneuverable, but they still feel like they have some weight to them. Here in space, there's no air resistance, but we still have a ton of mass. This ship, the Magellan class, is between 300 and 350 meters long, depending on how far the sublight engines end up extending out the back. But that's the same as a modern aircraft carrier. So you can imagine this huge chunk of metal in space should not be able to turn on a dime or do wild maneuvers. Newton's laws of motion still apply, and a lot of force is needed to change the direction of this object. Now, not every game gets this right. X4 is a good example for this, a game that otherwise I love, but it has a flight model that really falls flat for me. It feels very wooden and twitchy, and I think it's because the ships have very little feeling of inertia, especially the small fighter-sized ships. It's disappointing when you run into this because it just takes away a lot of the fun of flying itself, which of course sucks because space games are like 90% flying usually. Back to Elite though, the other thing that they do that I really like is that they made the autopilot very conservative. Sure, it'll get you where you're going, but if you hand fly important stages of flight like docking, landing, or decelerating out of warp, you as a human player can squeeze more performance out of the ship. Hand flying can get you to a destination faster, but if you mistime the deceleration, you miss your target and then have to do the loop of shame to come around for another pass. In this way, the game rewards having good pilot skills by letting you get better performance than the autopilot while having some low-stakes consequences for messing up. I'm not saying that Starship Sim should rip the flight model exactly from that game, but what I'm hoping to see eventually will be a system that maybe makes use of some of these concepts. Starship Sim is going to have planet landings also, so another job of the pilots will be to control the shuttles down to the surface. Once planets have fully realized atmospheres, with potential storms and rough winds, getting the small ships to the ground safely could be another fun, rewarding experience. Now, like I said, the actual sublight and thruster systems are a long way from being implemented, so this is just me opining into the ether on what I'd like to see eventually. One final note for the helm station is that full joystick support will be coming, so that'll improve the flying experience as well. I don't know if we'll be getting the full range of axes that other space sims have, which usually include being able to strafe left and right, up and down, but I would guess that this is probably likely. One final thing before we leave the bridge, some more light controls have been added to several of the rooms, including this one, which gives us kind of a neat opportunity here. Room lighting, if you go really high frequency, you get a blue color, but if you drop it all the way down to 2.5, 2000K, you can essentially get low-vis red lighting on the bridge without having to put the entire ship at red alert. So if you want more of a submarine feel to your bridge, or if you find that it is actually quite dark out and you want some red lighting to be a little bit easier on the eyes, you can go ahead and do that now, because then you step out here and you still have normal lighting throughout the rest of the ship. So it's literally only the bridge crew who would be maybe needing to see, I guess, visual scanning in addition to sensors. So you can do that if you want. I think that's a nice little addition. We'll put it back to, I think 5,000 is normal lighting. Okay, we'll head aft on Alpha Deck here. Captain's quarters, or not quarters, sorry, Captain's office. Nothing particularly changed there, but across the street is what is currently the armory, and is empty except for the flying cameras that you can use for some of the cinematic shots that I have captured for this series, for example. But this is not going to be, from what I understand, the armory going forward. This will be basically the A-deck restroom. So this is where all the bridge crew and administrative staff would be able to relieve themselves, whether on watch or between watch. The armory itself will move to a place that makes more sense, which is down on one of the lower decks, where security is going to be headquartered. They've got their main offices, and then they also have a shooting range that's down there. So it makes more sense, I would say, that the armory would be down next to all that. So it's my impression that that's probably where it's going to move to. Moving a little bit further back, Exo's office. Again, no change here. Bit of a change in the conference room, though. If we come in here, we can see that instead of a static or non-working video display, we now have essentially a YouTube embedder that has been hooked up here. And what we're currently seeing is Dan working on the construction of the ship in one of the previous live streams. Again, I urge you to head over there to check that out if you're interested in either the game or even just indie game dev in general. Again, I am not in any way a part of the development team, but I know all this information and it's readily at my fingertips because we all watch twice a week the game developer building the game and the ship, and so we get information that way. So that's pretty cool. I like how you even get the reflections up in the panels, up in the ceiling and around on the different objects. Just kind of, I mean, obviously with the state of modern graphics you would get that, but it's just really neat to see. You could use this for either just entertainment purposes, just putting something up to wait while you travel somewhere, or I was thinking, potentially in a multiplayer situation, you could even record your own YouTube videos to be able to make crew briefings for your human co-op crew. And I think maybe there's even like a mission designer that's sort of planned to be in the works, so you could potentially make entire mission briefings if you design a mission. So, yeah, that's just kind of fun. Really, I actually don't know if this is going to be permanent, but it's definitely a proof of concept for the movie theater, or cinema, if you will, that is located downstairs in the dormitory levels. So, same thing, you'd be able to put up big video, or put up videos on the big screen off of YouTube, or I guess any URL that was a video, I suppose.
In some cases, like here, it only needs to be on one side because that could just be one panel that bends across. So for the most part, all the panels are already positioned.
So there we go. So that's the update there. Let's continue moving back after we come into the observation room, the VIP lounge. Not a whole lot different here, although we do have just a few different objects just for messing around. We've got a pool table added here. Additionally, the piano in the corner now supports MIDI keyboard support. So if you have an electronic keyboard that you can plug in with a MIDI cord, you can come over and you can actually play the old piano. So not some huge gameplay improvement, but just a fun little feature that a lot of people were clamoring for, and it was an easy implement, so why not? So now we can play the piano on board. Okay, moving this way, we already see some improvements here. We've got some fancy new doors coming into the VIP lounge. So this was added kind of a while ago, I guess, but some nice decorative doors to get into the lounge. And then if we move out into the passageway here, we've got a security desk now at the top of the landing. This will be a watch station for a member of the security crew. There will be one here on B deck, downstairs on C deck, and then one down in engineering. And so these are basically just checkpoints or information booths to ensure that people are not wandering through the area that don't really have a reason to be here. Whether that's junior officers or enlisted people, if they have no business being up here on what is the dormitory level for the command officers and possibly VIPs, there's no real reason to have lowly ensigns just wandering up here if they're not on business. And this is a realistic setup. You know, this is on my ship what we called officer country. The deck was a different color, and it was sort of areas that you would get hassled if you were just hanging out and if you weren't on official business. So sort of the same thing here. In the case of, say, a ship boarding or something, this also is thick enough to be able to withstand small arms fire, at least for a little bit. So it does provide a bunker with which to fire, you know, at any enemies coming up either the stairs or maybe coming out of the elevator, although of course your attention would be split. It would maybe be hard for one person, but at some point in the future, there will be little cubbies on the back side of this, which will include some things, maybe a weapons locker, I'm not sure, but perhaps a little communicator, and maybe even some video monitors. Although we're not exactly sure about that yet. But there will be more to this later. But it's at least functional enough to move on. The other big thing, and this actually just got done, is the multi-deck lift has now been implemented. It's still a work in progress, but at least it has working buttons. Press the call lift button, and now you can actually enter, and you can see we've got all of the decks to call up. The doors do close behind you if we go down to F deck. The elevator smoothly proceeds down to F deck, and now we're on engineering. So while you do have the ladder wells here, the stairwells, so you could easily, and it's only like, what, 5 decks, you could easily just go by foot if you wanted to. There is now the option to take the elevator or the lift. This is definitely a multinational crew, so I think either terminology is acceptable. There's no reason to get caught up in that. The other cool thing implemented, though, is a bit of a logic system behind it, where if you select multiple decks, the elevator actually does queue up to go to those decks. So we go to the top. It'll stay for a moment, load and unload passengers. Then it proceeds down to, what did I press? D deck, which is currently not completed, so it's got the temporary mesh. But now we should go back up. To the science deck. There's C deck. That might have been the last input. So yeah, so a bit of an operating logic circuit behind the elevator already. So depending on either the inputs of the person inside the lift or people waiting on the specific decks who would then press the call button, it will program the elevator to go to those in the order in which they are received. So that's exciting, because that's just been an empty cavity, you know, forever. The other thing, let's see, so the new bulkhead and flooring panels are in place, and some work on the ceiling panels, on the overheads here, but they're not quite complete yet. But yeah, we can see, let's start with the bulkheads. New bulkheads are in place, which include railings, the 4 bolts that hold the panels in place. Same thing with the deck panels as well. You've got the visible bolts. There will be an engineering tool which will allow you to approach a panel and then be able to remove it, exposing what's behind it. So either to replace or repair the panel, or to get at some system that's behind the panel. So this would be used for maintenance items or for repairs. And these panels will be replicated by 3D printers down in the shops, down in engineering. In addition to that, the floor panels have been given a test mode which includes the grime layer, which I believe I talked about last time, or in one of the other videos. Each panel will track a counter for a couple of different layers, which include a damage layer and also a dirt layer, so a grime layer. And so right now, the floor panels are actually getting a little bit dirty. Each human player or NPC that walks over a panel will impart, I think it's 0.01 unit of grime to that panel. And for a while, I think it's maybe still going on, but for maybe a week or so, in the test build here, they were also, every minute they would also have an additional unit of grime added to them, just to test the process and also to show the programming of the little cleaning droid. So it's pretty cool. What that means is you'll have areas of natural dirtiness based on organic paths or organic traffic within the ship. So if you have a deck like this B deck, probably not going to get a whole lot of traffic. You only have, however many, what do we have, 6 staterooms. So you only have like the department heads walking through here, and then maybe a couple of crew members walking through for maintenance items or what have you. The other decks, like the habitation decks down below for the enlisted crew, or for the rest of the crew as a whole, those obviously will get much more dirty. Also, we've got the planters in place now, so all of these completed now, so that means that all of B deck is completely clad in these decorative panels. And then you also have these planters, which will eventually hold various decorative flowers, with the idea being possibly even that at some point you could switch out what flowers are in here and even switch out the dirt. So people who maybe don't want decorations, perhaps they would provide a blank cover thing here, and so maybe you could just have no greenery if you wanted. But perhaps being able to salvage interesting alien plants from a planet's surface and then being able to plant them in the planters, that's a possibility. So we'll see. For the moment, they just have this raised dirt texture and will eventually be filled in, like I said, with some decorative stuff. Now, what's behind all of these panels? Oh, no, wait, one more thing. The cleaning droid. You can see here we've got a little placeholder Roomba, and he talks a little bit. Hello. He says, excuse me, and he says hello, and some other stuff. But what's happening here is that this is only a placeholder Roomba. Eventually there will be it'll be replaced by actual cleaning droids on the ship that share the aesthetic of the universe and the ship itself, so they'll look a little more fitting and not just an actual Roomba here. But what this is a proof of concept that is going to cover both how the AI deals with cleaning the ship, but also affecting maintenance and repairs on the ship. So like I said, imparting grime to these floor panels, what the Roomba is actually doing, he's not on a random course, randomly bumbling throughout the deck. He's actually sensing the areas that have the highest dirtiness and will prioritize those areas and then head to them first. So for example, if we were to just run back and forth on these 2 panels, imparting many levels of grime to them, this will eventually become the dirtiest part of this deck, meaning that Mr. Roomba will prioritize coming to this area to clean these 2 deck plates. It's difficult to see. There is a little bit of grime there, there's a bit of dirtiness, but obviously not very much, only as much as one person can impart in a few seconds. The cleaning droid will come around the corner on a mission to get these deck panels. So one, that's showing how the cleaning droids will work, obviously, on the ship, but also the exact same code will be applied to the AI crew, specifically the engineering crew. So the exact same thing will happen. Should a component, either of a system or a physical component of the ship, like a deck plate or a bulkhead or an overhead or a door or something, if it has a high level of damage, the AI will prioritize repairs going to those locations first. Now, there won't just be cleaning robots, there will also be human members of the crew who do have cleaning duties around the ship. I'm not clear if there is going to be a specific cleaning department here on the ship. The game developers often use the term janitors for the people, cleaning and taking care of the plants out in the public areas and whatnot. I don't really like the term janitor. I don't think it's very dignified for being on such a cool futuristic spacecraft. Sort of like how we don't use the term mess specialist anymore for the people that make food in the galleys. They're now culinary specialists. Along the same lines, I like to think of the cleaners on the ship as being part of deck department, because that's, for me, in my experience, on our ship, deck department was responsible for cleaning and painting all of the public areas. Actually, deck department does a lot of stuff. They do line handling, underway replenishment. They're in charge of the outside of the ship, removing rust, painting areas. They're in charge of the anchors. If it's in the merchant navy, they're also in charge of the cargo that's being loaded, unloaded, and secured on the ship. And also all of the helmsmen tend to come from the deck department. So we'll have to see how that eventually breaks down once there is a crew on board and what the developers decide on. But for me, that's what I think of. That's them. That's deck department in charge of of the cleaning. Usually junior crew members, you know, they're assigned to deck department if they maybe don't have a real job yet. You know, they're just in, and then they kind of do jack of all trades for a little while, and then they decide what they want to actually be when they grow up. A little bit of fun Navy history for you. To complicate matters even further, in the U.S. Navy, this was also known as the First Lieutenant's Division, or Department. And the First Lieutenant, in this case, was not a rank, but is actually the name of the head of the department. So on smaller ships, the First Lieutenant, who is in charge of deck department, could be as low as an enlisted person. But on something as big as a aircraft carrier, that can be up to a commander. He's in charge of it's a giant department with many, many, many people. This again comes from the days of sailing ships, when you had a captain and all officers were the lieutenants, while the most senior of those lieutenants was known as the first, and he would be in charge of deck department. These particular terms then do not apply to any other country's navy or the merchant fleet, but the responsibilities of deck department as a whole are kind of the same in any service. Another item is the tack numbers here on the panels. And what this is showing you is the location of the panel, but also the location of yourself. This can be used for navigating the ship as well as finding where you need to go to. The numbers here, at least as they currently stand, are showing you that we're on B deck, we're in the aft quadrant, it's panel number 103, and it's the right side. Sort of an arbitrary right or left has been applied to each corridor. Now on a modern ship you have a center line always that follows the keel, and then that's very easy to determine port or starboard based on that. But here on a ship like this, where we have so many round passageways, port or starboard become meaningless. So simply applying a right or left marker to differentiate what side of the P-way you're on takes the place of that system and makes just as much sense. I think that there will also be an additional ring number, so whether you're in ring number 1, the inner ring, or an outer ring on some of the bigger decks, that might come in as well. Now, I call these tack numbers because that's the terminology that we used in the U.S. Navy. What we had was a painted sign in each compartment called a bullseye, which would show you the location of that compartment. The bullseye tells you at a glance what deck you're on, whether you are port or starboard of the center line, and how far out, how far forward or aft you are in the ship, what job that space is intended for, and then finally what division owns the space and who is responsible for it. And then you would get individual frame numbers along the ship, and that's how you would have to find things. And I definitely, personally, used that system, especially as a junior sailor on board, having to trace out systems and find very obscure valves. Now, I call them tack numbers, and here's some more random naval historical tidbits, because the little hyphens between the numbers are called tacks in Navy terminology. This dates back again to sailing ships and the use of signal flags by British ships. The Royal Navy began using simple signal flags as early as 1338, though some flags, like the red flag of battle, for example, likely are as old as the Phoenicians and actually come to us through the Greeks. Modern complex signaling came from systems evolving in the late 1700s and early 1800s, and included the French contribution of creating signal codes for numbers. Signal flags were, and still are, run up on ropes called halyards to convey messages to other ships. What they call a tack line is a 6-foot space in between groupings of flags, making it clear that a new word or message is starting. When spoken, this space was called tack and was written as a hyphen. At some point, over time, the term spread from just its use in the signaling world into general naval use. And at least as far as I can tell, this is an international convention used by at least any English-speaking countries. Of course, the tack line space would still be used by other countries' ships, whether they are naval or merchant, but they may call them something else. But that's the general idea behind why I use that terminology. So yeah, tack numbers. So let's come down here to C deck. This is the science deck. And here we get a good look of what's actually behind these panels. And this is what you would see when removing one of these panels. So you can see you've got the brackets with a bit of welding going on here. And this is where the bolts would go in. You've got the cutout in the structure of the ship itself with some raised insulation behind it. So this is both thermal insulation and also sound deadening. And so different panels will actually have systems running through them, whether that's wires or pipes. In the overhead, there's the HVAC system. You can't quite see there, but there's actually ducting for the air system. So all of that would be accessible once you remove the bits. Same thing with the deck plates. Here's the skeleton of the decks that live under the plates themselves. Again, this is B-deck. Work has barely begun down here, but this is what the actual innards of the ship look like with all of the panels off. And each section here, it's not just decorative. Each line between panels is also how the game will keep track of atmospheric conditions within the ship. So each cube of air here is tracked individually, and it monitors things like air pressure, temperature. So if you have a fire, for example, as it moves from block to block, the temperature increases, things would burn, causing damage to bits of the ship, would start damaging the deck plates, the bulkheads. It would progress through each cube of air here. And then same thing with the loss of pressure. Of course, that would go very fast, but still, that is the system behind how the game would keep track of that. C-Deck is one of the first decks to be radically different in design from its predecessor. As you can tell as we come out here to the ends, we now have a much different outer curved passageway that comes along the outside of the deck here, and you can see actually curves back in on itself, heading back towards the center beam of the ship, which is where the FTL ring is. Currently temporary lighting up here, and these are not real lights. These are similar to the lights that were in the hangar bay in the older, or what is still the current public version. They're not hooked up to anything. They're literally just here for convenience. But here now, this is underneath the ring. There you go. If we look out there, those are the heat sinks coming off the FTL system, and then the ring proceeds up and over the top of us, which actually we could see if we come over here. There it is. So under the ring here, this is the center beam of the ship at the extreme port and starboard sides. We're going to have this large common room, which I don't know, would have maybe some sitting places in it perhaps, and tables or something. But at the top, there's going to be a large dome. And then in the middle here, some sort of circular spiral staircase that then proceeds down through the deck. So not only do you have the stairwell that's in the middle of the ship there right by the elevators, but now we're going to have additional ways of getting up and down through the deck. So there's not going to be a single way to travel, which is good because in case of emergency, if a particular part of the ship receives damage, you would be stuck. And of course, you don't want that. So in addition to just being a neat, fun design and kind of a neat public area with a pretty view, we'll again have this this armored glass that will go over the top here and allow us to see out into the stars as we travel, but then also go down through the other decks down into the habitation area. So there's one of these on each side. And you can see if we follow this corridor down to its end, we've got another stairs that lead us down below. And this is overlooking what appears to be this is the hangar bay. See, now we're getting back into the parts of the ship. This is the liminal spaces part of the ship, the back rooms, which are just off-putting because they've not been worked on, and they only have this placeholder temporary mesh walls. So obviously this would not be the final texture, but we've got the beginnings of the rooms in place here, and many things will be going. I don't remember what all of these are going to be off the top of my head, but again, this is looking out into the large hangar area. So you'll be able to sit on these benches, decorative benches around through the ring here in the ship. Here is the other, except one deck down now. Here's the circular staircase. This is now on the port side as we continue to head forward. And as we come around to the forward section of the ship now, this is along the center line, and we have what is sort of a mall area. We've got a couple of things here. I believe medical is going to be here. The botanical area, that department, the botanical gardens, the onboard gardens are going to be one of these rooms. The movie theater is here. I'm trying to remember what else. I think this might be the ship's crew galley will actually be here, was one of these rooms. So there'll be a lot going on here. Several of these rooms will be 2 decks, so they'll be quite big. Up in the front here, although it doesn't look like it at all because it's just all this temporary weird walling, this is the very front of the ship, and this, I guess, will contain some sort of public park space or observation room, similar to what we saw on the other version of the ship with the large windows out front. There probably won't be huge windows, but I think we'll have, you can see a little bit of the curve there, probably just some observation windows here up front, some other things. So this is the very nose of the ship. Coming back through, here is the movie theater or cinema section, so you can kind of see this temporary blocking shows where seats would be. Then we've got the large screen here, and then once again that video embedder that we saw upstairs would be placed here as well, so then you'd be able to play videos. The security offices are going to be around here too, and in the dark and with things not being completed, I don't know how to navigate there, but there is the security center along with their shooting range. There's a bowling alley around here as well. Now I think these are going to look quite cool once they're all complete and be all lit up and actually have their rooms in. My only concern is that we're still only dealing with a crew of 200, which means off-duty personnel. You figure you have 66 on watch, 66 sleeping, and then 66 off-duty roaming, just having fun. So only 66 people. I mean, this is now, the ship is significantly bigger than it was before. And I guess I'm just a little worried that the size of the ship in these spaces means that they're going to feel very empty and not lived in, because you're going to have 66 people spread throughout the ship. I mean, some of them might be in their quarters. And I guess maybe it would be more than that. Let's say maybe 100 people, because you'd have 66 off duty and then the random people who are on duty that are traveling the ship. So doing maintenance, cleaning. So I guess you'd have a few more people. But once we see the ship complete with a full AI crew on board, I guess we'll be able to evaluate properly how that's going to feel. I just hope it's not going to feel like a ghost town, you know? I like my ships to feel very homey and lived in. So so that's something, again, that I'll be looking for obviously much later down the road, once the ship is a lot more complete. Coming back through here, this is one of the habitation levels. You can see where the doors still are to all of the crew berthing rooms. They would be behind this. Again, this is just a temporary mesh. That's just representing the new designs of the different decks, and these eventually will be replaced. You can see, yeah, here's greenery coming out of this one. These will eventually be replaced with all the decking and the bulkheads that we saw upstairs. Down here on F deck, not much difference here, other than each of the decks was expanded. The crawl space, or not even crawl space, the space between the decks was expanded to 1 meter apiece to accommodate systems being routed, you know, running through between the 2 decks. So what that meant is that all of these stairs didn't fit. So these are all newly adjusted stairs coming down this stairwell, along with new handrails, because there was a big gap in between the floor and the first step, and you actually had to jump to get on them. So that's all been corrected now, but we'll still see evidence of that down in engineering, where pieces of the ship's geometry don't reach the next deck. You can see right there, here's these support beams that don't actually make it. And if we move that crate, you can see here these stairs are still messed up with a big gap in between them. So, like I said, Dan, the developer, he's beginning at the top of the ship and working his way down. Once he gets down to the engineering spaces here, he'll be readjusting everything as necessary, and everything will fit properly and look as it should. And then all these, again, temporary walls will be removed, and we'll be able to get into these rooms once again. So, as far as I can tell, that's it for the updates for the moment. The biggest things were up here on the upper decks, getting the walls completed, the deck plates, the security desks, working on some of the ceiling panels, getting those in place. You can still see that this is still a work in progress. This light got changed. This is a whole new circular light that is now over the landing instead of sort of the plain rectangular one, so that's an improvement. The first test of a grime layer system is in place. We've got the first test of the AI pathing code is in place with the cleaning robot. The lift is now operational. So that is going to conclude our tour for now. This brings us basically up to date with what has been happening in the game. Again, progress continues to be done all week, every week, and then twice a week we actually get to see it being done on those live streams as we're seeing here. So thank you once again for joining me on this little tour, going through the updates in the game as they currently are. The game is years away from being complete and does not even have any true gameplay loops in it yet, but every day gets us a little bit closer, and I'm excited for that. I enjoy watching the process just as a creative person, as a creator myself, not in game dev, but I do lots of research, historical research for my usual videos. And Dan here, he has to do lots of research for what he's doing. In fact, he said that 50% of his time taken in making the new galaxy as it is was done just reading and looking up articles and making notes, and then the other 50% was actually just the time to do the programming and setting up the logic for stuff. So that was a very significant but necessary hurdle to get over, and that's building the base of the game to then be able to build actual gameplay off of that. So that's what I'm looking forward to, in the coming months and whatnot. So I won't be doing these update videos all the time. I'm not going to do like a weekly update or anything. We'll just wait until we get another significant improvement to the game, preferably once we eventually get some actual gameplay to show off. That's most likely what I'm going to be waiting for. So once there is something significant to, again, show off, then I'll maybe make some more videos. Until then, happy flying, and have a great day.
There. Now we have our bolt hole. And all I need to do then is just do that.